wardrobe.
Fantastic.
Totally
Wardrobe,
normal.
a cupboard, yeah, perfectly normal. Connor, are you talking to yourself in some sort of closet?
I'm in the attic.
Okay.
To be honest, everyone's feeling such a novelty, this broadcasting from home. To be honest, I've been doing this since before it was cool. I do different voiceover stuff. I do stuff for kids' TV, and I'm always recording stuff and sending it out. So this is actually quite normal for me. I'm used to being in this lockdown lonely thing. Apart from Saturdays when I'm at a match, the rest of the time I'm cooped up in the attic. But
Okay.
look, it could be worse. Could be worse.
It certainly could be. But you mentioned where you would usually be on a Saturday. So let's conjure up those images first of all. What are we all missing the most? Jenny, you're usually walking up and down the pit lane talking to the top Formula One drivers. Are you missing the smell of petrol, the exotic Formula One fumes?
I really am, and I'm missing, it's silly, isn't it? But I'm missing the people the most. The F1 family is an incredible family of all sorts of people, thousands that travel the world every race weekend. And they do become your family. They become very close to you. And, you finish at the end of December and you say goodbye, and it's like the end of term, I suppose. And then you all get back together at testing in February and say hi. And a few people have changed kits and T-shirts because they've changed teams. But on the whole, everybody is back in the same place. And yes, we were back in, I think I was in Australia for 30 hours in total. But I don't feel like I got to say hello to anybody because we were keeping our distance from pretty much everybody. And yeah, I miss the action and the competitive edge and watching the cars at their very best. But it's a people sport as well as a machine sport, and I do miss the people a lot.
Connor, is it the smells of a football match? That's what I miss. The dirty burgers mixed with the freshly cut grass. That's what we miss.
No, there is, and it's funny, and you're dead right about the smells. I mean, that occurred to me about a week ago. Is there's certain things which at the time actually kind of almost repulsed me. I didn't like, and now I really miss it. And I've begun to wonder what it was. It's things like the smell of manure from the police horses. that sort of stuff, which normally you'd walk like, oh God, get me out of here, or you get a blast. That's actually what I sort of miss. And I think for me as well, the camaraderie. When we broadcast the radio, you go, and once the game is on, you're kind of insulated because you've got your headphones on and your microphone in front of your face, and although you're speaking, you're kind of speaking to a broader audience. Maybe you've got a summariser alongside you. But I think what I maybe have taken for granted over the years, and what I miss now, is that camaraderie beforehand, just being in the press room and speaking with the written journalists and the people from TV and the people working for websites and maybe the media staff who work for the games. And what you realise is how those people have become this integral part of your life, people that you see a few times every week, and they always have the stories to tell, and we all have lived such similar lives. I often think people who work regularly at sporting events, it's a little bit like being a truck driver, if you like. We've got to go to a place, we've got to get a job done, we've got to travel back again afterwards, and we all have so much in common from that. So I think, just that camaraderie of hanging around with people, moaning about VAR, whatever it is, the things that we used to think was very important, which all seem so trivial now.
Well, that is the thing. Will we ever moan about them again? We should appreciate them, shouldn't we? That goalless draw on a freezing cold Tuesday night, wherever you are, stuck up on top of the gantry, Connor, complain no more. Shall we look at some events, though, that aren't going to happen, sadly, this year, but as to what could have happened? We're playing Fantasy Sports World with Jenny Gow and Conor McNamara with us today. Let's go to a hot July afternoon. Strawberries are being consumed. There's a murmur of laughter around centre court. Someone's just shouted, "Come on, Tim." We have got the Wimbledon men's final. Roger Federer against Novak Djokovic once again. Let's take you deep into another encounter between these tennis greats. Here is commentary from our tennis correspondent, Russell Fuller.
Well, ultimately, it's not quite had the drama of last year's final, but what a start Roger Federer made, winning the first set 6-love, and so nearly taking a 2-set-to-love lead in the tiebreak which followed. But that extraordinary through-the-legs winner from Novak Djokovic turned the tide, and here he is, leading 2-1 and 5-2, its championship point. He serves, Federer with a chip backhand return. Djokovic opens up on the forehand, Federer on the defence. The court is open, and a winning volley to seal a 6th Wimbledon title for Novak Djokovic. A third in a row. The undisputed world number one. He's still not been beaten in 2020. Djokovic again proves unstoppable on centre court.
That's Russell Fuller. I set all the commentators. I'm going to do the same for you, Connor, as well. I know we've got yours coming up on the Premier League moment we may have missed, but I think everyone enjoyed doing that. I like the way, though, Russell could have done anything there. He went for a slightly disappointing men's final. I don't know why he did that. So
He's getting that one out of the system, so now the next one will be really good. Yeah.
Hopefully, when it happens, it's going to be really, really good. Let's look at some of the events then, Jenny and Connor, that we're going to miss, unfortunately. Roger Federer is going to be nearly 40 by the time Wimbledon 2021 comes around. We may have seen the last of him at Wimbledon. Serena Williams' chances to equal the all-time record of Margaret Court maybe slipping away in it. And in your sport, Jenny, Lewis Hamilton going for a 7th world title, equaling Michael Schumacher's record. That may be on hold as well.
I know, it's there was such a big build-up to this because we started asking the question, I suppose, halfway through last season, so dominant has Lewis Hamilton and his Mercedes been, that we were saying, next year, another dominant car, that's got to be 7, surely. We thought nothing bar the unprecedented would get in the way of Hamilton winning a 7th world title this year. The unprecedented has happened. We thought it would be, he went skydiving or skiing and broke his leg or something to stop him from actually getting in that car. But he's not getting in the car. We haven't had the cancellation or postponement of the British Grand Prix quite yet. We're expecting news by the end of the month. But, it seems fairly unrealistic, doesn't it, that they could get a race away on the 19th of July. So it's just bizarre to think that Hamilton might not get his championship title this year, or even weirder that he could get his championship title this year. They need 8 races to happen this year for him to get it.
Well, we'll look at maybe how things can resume in a moment, but it does make you think, doesn't it, Connor, about the sporting stories that we've been robbed of. It may be Federer at Wimbledon. It could be Simone Biles, who was set to be the star of the Tokyo Olympics, win multiple medals. She's going to be 24 by the time the next games start. All these great stories that we may be missing out on now.
Yeah, I think you know what? Particularly, I feel sorry for the Olympians because there are regular Grand Prix. Wimbledon is every year. There's 4 Grand Slams every year. For the Olympians, their whole life for the last 4 years, probably longer than that, has been steering towards this summer. Training regimes, people in terms of even life plans. I'm sure things like people getting married or deciding to have children, it all would have been planned around, making sure that the athlete was in the prime of their fitness and health for this summer. And then suddenly that gets thrown into disarray, and they're the ones I think I feel particularly sorry for. I know Simone Biles, actually, who you mentioned, has got a very fractious relationship with the Gymnastics Authority in the USA at the best of times, and I think she was sort of plastering that up just to get through this summer, and she's intimated that another year might be too much for them all to get on with each other. Look, the whole world has been tipped upside down and shaken, and athletes are no different from it. And you're right, so many moments, and I think particularly it's the summer. I often think through the winter and the early spring, it's all setting up for the big moments, isn't it? It's qualifying rounds, it's preliminaries, it's the knockout stages of the Champions League. It's very, very exciting, but it's all building up towards the big events in the summer. And I often think things like the Snooker World Championship, it instantly brings me back when I was a student in university, and I always thought that was scheduled at the worst possible time of the year, because the Snooker World Championship, which is is the one thing that dominated terrestrial TV. It would be on for 12 hours a day, just at the moment when you were supposed to be studying. The pre-internet era, it was the ultimate distraction. You couldn't get yourself away from someone's 147 break or whatever. It's this time of year, isn't it, that all the really exciting stuff is due to happen, and we're definitely missing it.
Well, go on then, both of you, and don't by any means give away what we've got to look forward to in your commentary, Connor, but both of you then, what's the big event or the performance that we're going to be missing that's going to affect you the most then, do you think, Jenny?
I think, so this year in testing, I think it was day 2, the first hour of testing, it's normally a fairly dull affair, even for the likes of me, who's an enthusiast in Formula 1. But all of a sudden, Mercedes brought out this DAS system, a dual axis steering system, which basically means the driver was moving his hands forward with the steering wheel or pulling the steering wheel back, depending on what he wanted the car to do. And it's like, hang on a minute. Steering wheels go, turn to the right, turn to the left. They don't go forwards and backwards. So everyone was fascinated by this. It got the entire motorsport community talking. And we were expecting Mercedes to come out of the blocks in Australia and be even stronger than they have before. This is the team that has won every year in the hybrid era. And we're not getting that performance. We're not getting to see it. We haven't got a clue if this system would actually work or not. Would it mean that Mercedes were catapulted to stratospheric leagues of their own? Or would it be an absolute washout and actually the Red Bull, potentially driven by Max Verstappen, or the two Ferrari drivers, Leclerc and Vettel, were they going to really be able to tussle this year and fight back against Hamilton? Would Bottas maybe even do a unthinkable of a Nico Rosberg and beat Hamilton? And we're not getting any of that. We're just getting me in a cupboard.
Which is very nice next to your wedding gown and your ball gowns and everything, but not quite the same as innovative steering wheels in Formula One. Connor, what for you then? You mentioned the summer, it's all building towards that. What is it for you then?
Yeah, I'm tempted to be mischievous here and say, I was going to enjoy Liverpool's little collapse at the top of the Premier League. I was at Vicarage Road when they were beaten 3-0 by Watford. The last game of note that took place in England before the shutdown was Liverpool being beaten by Atletico Madrid. And I'm tempted to say, how intriguing it would have been when Manchester City narrowed that gap down to 3 points with a game to go or something like that. But no, let's be fair. Liverpool, we're certainly going to win the title. And I think, in terms of column inches and space on programs, I mean, that seems to be the one. Liverpool fans who've waited 30 years, who've had the greatest team their club have had in that time, and talk about horrendous timing for them of all years to have a delay, for Liverpool. I think for Manchester City intrigue as well, I commentated on their first leg of their Champions League game against Real Madrid when they did so well, and I think they were certainly looking favourites to go through and progress. And I think with everything going on in the background about the financial fair play and the issues with UEFA, I actually think Manchester City would have loved to win the Champions League, and I think they would have had a really good chance of doing so as well. So that climax to the football season is sadly something that's been taken from us now, and I'm well aware people are discussing about how it can happen and how it can finish. I'm increasingly worried that it actually won't be, that they will come up with some system of dividing up where people are at the moment.
Right.
But that those are very murky waters.
Yeah, that certainly are, and those are the big events then that we're missing. We have got Fantasy Sports World to deliver some moments, though. Next weekend we would have been in Augusta at the Masters, so let's take you onto the 18th green then. It is late on the final day. Closing stages. Our golf correspondent Ian Carter is there. He can see there is a putt to win the title.
And it falls to the world number one, the man from Northern Ireland. He's lined it up from behind the hole. Now he's looking from behind the ball. He's wasting no time at all. Very businesslike. He's chosen the line. He's over the ball now. One quick glance at the hole, a rock of the shoulders. The ball is on its way. I tell you what, it's looking good. It's looking very good. It's in! McIlroy leaps into the air. The Masters champion at long last. It's the career Grand Slam, one of only 6 now to have won the big 4 events in men's golf. McIlroy joins the absolute greats. He has a Masters green jacket, major number 5, and crucially, preciously, a full set of major titles.
It could have happened for Rory McIlroy. We didn't give any hints or clues to our commentators as to where they should go with these. That was Ian Carter's take on the Augusta Masters, with Rory McIlroy winning the title. Jenny Gow, Conor McNamara are with me. It is Fantasy Sports World if you're just joining us, and if McIlroy's just won the Masters this year. He hasn't. I should keep saying that in case we get into trouble. What about the changes that could come about because of this? It's a pause for all of us in our regular lives, and who knows when things do start again, how things will change. Jenny, do you think this could be a major catalyst in particular in Formula One? It is a sport, of course, that requires a lot of people to jet around the world, doesn't it?
Yeah, I think 4,500 regularly jets to each race, so it is a huge community of people travelling the world, and I think it's going to be incredibly hard to get it back on the road. Could you do it behind closed doors? Well, you possibly could, but in order to do that, you're reliant on Switzerland, America, Switzerland, America, Italy, and those countries to also be clear, because you've got the teams coming in from those countries. Yeah, so it's not just a case of, let's race at Silverstone for the remainder of the season. We can do races, in reverse or forward, the normal way we do it. You've got the teams, they normally have to agree with everything that's being organised by F1 and the FIA. So politically, it's why nothing really moves very quickly in Formula One. They have taken measures to try and speed that up, and they have given over really control from the teams to F1 themselves. But it's really hard to see a time when all of the countries involved will become available, I suppose, to go in and out of airspace and things like that. So I spoke to Bernie Ecclestone yesterday, and he said, well, they should just cancel the whole season, be done with it, and pick up again next year. Financially, that is a huge problem. It could be the end of some of the teams, the end of some of the places that we go to race. Circuit of the Americas, they've already got rid of all their staff. So it's an impossible situation. Yes, it's only sport, but actually it's a lot of people's livelihoods on the line as well.
Yeah, and that is the point, isn't it, Connor, that there are bigger issues, of course, going on. We're talking specifically about sporting events, though, on the programme today, and it does affect a lot of people, a lot of people's livelihoods. And within all sports, you could look back in years to come on this year as the one that changed everything.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, at the moment, it's difficult to imagine, take somewhere like Old Trafford, Manchester United Stadium, and 76,000 people crammed in like sardines again. I mean, it's almost like I can see a time when they'll open a stadium like that, but people have to sit with 2 empty seats between each spectator or something like that for a while. Or I mean, who knows? But you're right about the peripheral industries around sport, from the coaches that ferry fans, the restaurants, even down to the people who print the tickets, who produce the programs, the cleaners at the stadium, the car parks, the people who own the various facilities that are used in the sport. I mean, it's not just the teams, it's not just the players on the pitch. It's a huge industry that goes so far and so wide, and it's difficult to see things just starting up. It'll be a gradual return to that, and I think what will be interesting is some sports will do it better than others, and I think it'll be intriguing to see who gets that correct balance. And unfortunately, a lot of it might be to do that clean sweep of a start again, trying to pick up exactly where you left off. That could actually be more difficult, but these are the challenges. The one thing that's fascinating about it, and even on a broader thing, from a medical point of view and whatever, is there's been very few things in the history of humankind where everyone is focused on the same issue. You think all these great minds around the world, they're not distracted by other things now. They're all trying to find the solutions to the problems we now face, and I think it'll be intriguing to come up, to see some of the genius solutions that people inevitably will come up with.
A couple more fantasy sports worlds before we go. Fantasy moments. We've got Connor's on the way, but one sport was already trying to transform its fortunes with an innovative plan. The 100 was a new cricket competition set to launch in England. It featured many of the world's best players, new format of the game. Its launch, though, is in doubt. Not on Fantasy Sports World, because the cricket commentator and stump presenter Alison Mitchell's in the commentary box at the Oval in London, ready for the first ball.
Well, a capacity crowd here at the Oval, the crowd at fever pitch for this first ball of the brand new 100 competition. Kids, families here, and they're roaring on. Mitchell Starc for the Welsh Fire as he comes into bowl to Jason Roy, who smashes him, and it's gone for 6. What a start! What a start to the men's 100. Incredible. Jason Roy has seen off Mitchell Starc. 6 off the first ball.
There you go. You give it a blank canvas, go for a 6 off the first ball. That was Alison Mitchell at the Oval in Fantasy Sports World. Our time is almost up, so the moment has come then, Connor. Your moment that we may well miss out on 2020, but recreated here for us on Sports World. Just quickly set the scene then. Just tell us where we are, first of all, for this commentary moment.
Right, well, we are going to be at Wembley Stadium. This is the Euro 2020 final. Obviously, games have been played across 12 different cities across Europe, but the final at Wembley. I have to say, Percy, I was tempted to put the Republic of Ireland in there, but I think sanity has got the better of me, so I'm going for an England against Belgium final.
Okay, England-Belgium final. You ready for this then, Jenny? Here we are. We're at Wembley, final of Euro 2020. Conor McNamara with the commentary.
And that's it. It's all over. The final whistle. And England are the European champions. The 16th European Championship. England won. Belgium 0 at Wembley. The winner in this final came from Jadon Sancho. A cool low finish. The Belgians, though, will rue that missed penalty from Romelu Lukaku in the first half. But for Gareth Southgate, it's an historic moment. The seeds were sown in Russia 2 years ago when England's youngsters went all the way to the semi-finals. But now, in 2020, they've gone further. They have won the European Championship, and 54 years of hurt are over for England.
Yes, there we go.
Brilliant, amazing.
From Wembley to the attic. That was brilliant. Change it to 2021, Conor. We may just have that moment. Who knows?
It is fantasy. You do know that, don't you?
Yeah. I think I probably know that. Yeah. So thank you so much, Conor. Jenny, before you go though, Conor, quick final game. Abandon, resume, or void? What are you going for the football season then? What's going to happen? Can it carry on?
Yeah, it's not what I would want. I would love it to carry on. I just think we're not going to get the ideal solutions here. It's going to come down to massive practicalities, and that's why I think void.
There are Liverpool fans around the world throwing things at their radio.
Yeah, I know.
He puts that in right at the very end. I can't come back with anything there. Voided the season. And Jenny, come the end of the season, come Abu Dhabi, maybe, are you going to be sitting there talking to a Formula One champion?
I don't think it will be Abu Dhabi in November. Sorry, I think it may well be February that we end up seeing a champion crowned. I think it will be Lewis Hamilton. I think it will happen by hook or by crook, because if you look at what F1 are doing now, making ventilators, helping with the medical side of things, they will find a way.
And even if it is just a few races, even if it's the minimum of 8, he's legitimately the 7th time world champion then.
It means no less to him. They'll look back at the record books and they'll see number 7 and maybe number 8 next year, and he'll become the best F1 driver of all time in the stats.
Okay, more fantasy coming up then. Who knows? We've got a lot of time to fill. Jenny Gow, thank you so much. Conor McNamara, thank you. Back to your attics, back to your wardrobes, wherever you are. That has been Sports World for another Saturday. We'll be back with you at the same time next Saturday. Thanks so much to our studio managers, to Jack and to Alex and to producer Tom back there in the studio, making sure this all happens. And for me, in my cupboard under the stairs, it's goodbye.
Sports World is a BBC Sport production for the BBC World Service.
The BBC World Service wants to share your stories of how coronavirus is affecting you and your community. What challenges are you facing?
I just felt immediately protected and safe because they all, realise the importance of protecting people like me, and I'm just so grateful.
Simply record a voice memo of up to 5 minutes on your smartphone. To find out where to send it to, go to bbcworldservice.com/response. Hello, I'm Zoe, and as you know, over the past few weeks, we've been making some changes to our schedules as we adapt to the changing world around us. Next, we look at the ethical issues arising from the coronavirus pandemic. On air, online, and on mobile, this is the BBC World Service, the world's radio station.
Hello, I'm Michael Sandel. In the face of the pandemic sweeping the world, what's the right thing to do? Should we use surveillance to make sure people are staying at home? Is it wrong to stockpile?
I think this is fundamentally a question of inequality, because if you can afford to stockpile them, great, good for you. You can buy 20 of each product in one go and then stay at home for a month.
And if there's a shortage of ventilators, how should they be allocated?
Going around now is like moving in a city with a gun. So if you are walking in your street and you see someone with a gun, you call the police.
I'll be discussing pandemic ethics with participants from around the world. That's The Global Philosopher on the BBC World Service after the news.
Hello, I'm David Harper with the BBC News. The Spanish Prime Minister, Pedro Sanchez, has said that his country is close to passing the peak of infection from the coronavirus as the number of deaths fell again. Spain recorded its lowest daily death toll from the virus for a week, with 809 fatalities. The figure increases the Spanish total to more than 11,000. Mr. Sanchez has said he is nevertheless asking opposition leaders to support plans to extend the current lockdown by another 2 weeks.
Necesitamos algo más de tiempo. We need a little more time, and we need above all to keep up the collective force which has given us the first results. For that reason, following the recommendations of experts and the scientists who advise the Spanish government, I'm announcing that next Tuesday, the Council of Ministers will again request the authorization of Congress to extend the state of emergency for a second time on April the 12th until midnight on the 25th of April.
The international police agency Interpol has warned that cybercriminals are targeting hospitals at the forefront of the coronavirus response. Here's our Europe regional editor, Mike Sanders.
Interpol says hospitals facing unprecedented physical dangers are now up against another threat from cybercriminals. It says emails purporting to contain advice about the coronavirus urge the recipient to open a link. If they do, malicious software blocks the computer until a ransom is paid. Interpol Secretary General Jürgen Stock said ruthless cybercriminals were looking to make a profit at the expense of sick patients. He said locking hospitals out of critical systems could directly lead to deaths. The agency is compiling a list of suspicious COVID-related internet domains and providing technical support and security advice.
Opposition parties in Germany have criticised proposals to change the constitution in order to keep Parliament working in case of a worsening of the coronavirus crisis. Leaders of the three main opposition groups in the Bundestag have rejected proposals made by the Speaker of the House. Wildlife experts in India say there's been a significant increase in the sightings of wild animals during the country's coronavirus lockdown in what would normally be busy city streets. With more detail, Sanjay Dasgupta.
It's not unheard of for wild animals to find their way into crowded Indian cities. But the Wildlife Trust of India says many more people are noticing and taking pictures, because the streets are eerily empty. Footage posted online shows an elephant strolling through the streets of the city of Doiwala, startling a milk vendor who promptly flees. A sloth bear darts through rows of parked vehicles in Paratwada. Amidst the economic pains of a lockdown, many are enjoying an unexpected pleasure, waking up to the sound of birdsong instead of heavy traffic.
Sanjay Dasgupta reporting, and a complete 3-week lockdown has been imposed across all India to combat the spread of COVID-19. You're listening to the latest world news from the BBC. A 24-hour curfew has taken effect in 7 districts of Saudi Arabia's second city, Jeddah, in an attempt to stop the spread of coronavirus. Residents of those areas are not allowed to go to other parts of the city, and outsiders are not allowed to visit. However, they can go out to buy essential food or medicine. At least 7 people have been killed during 2 attacks by suspected Islamist militants in Burkina Faso. Security officials told the French news agency that a military vehicle was targeted with a bomb on Friday near Twaini in the northwest of the country. 3 soldiers were killed and 4 others were injured. The government in Somalia has condemned the abduction and rape of 2 young girls, aged just 3 and 4. The doctor in charge of the hospital where they are now being treated says they need major surgery. An official said several arrests had been made following the attack, which happened on Wednesday. With more, here's Will Ross.
The parents say the 2 girls, who are cousins, were walking home from school in Afgoy, close to the capital Mogadishu. They were then seized by men who took them away and sexually assaulted them. There was then a desperate search in the neighbourhood, and they were found alone the following day. The fact that the girls are just 3 and 4 years old has added to the shock in Somalia, where reports of rapes have increased in recent years. It's thought that such horrific crimes have long been taking place, but people are now more aware of the need to publicise the incidents in order to bring about change. Social media means reports of such attacks spread fast.
The contest to win the leadership of Britain's main opposition Labour Party has been won by Keir Starmer, until now the party's spokesman on exiting the European Union. He's seen as a more moderate politician than Jeremy Corbyn, who led Labour to its biggest defeat since 1935 and the general election in December. Sir Keir said his mission was to restore trust in Labour after 4 election defeats in a row. That's the latest BBC News.
My name is Michael Sandel. Welcome to this episode of The Global Philosopher. I'm joined from participants from around the world to discuss pandemic ethics in a public health emergency that reaches across the globe with the COVID-19 virus overwhelming hospitals. What's the right thing to do? In previous episodes of The Global Philosopher, we've come to you from a high-tech studio. Today, we're all in our homes, the BBC production team and our participants from over a dozen countries, from Italy and Spain to China and South Korea. Despite the difficult conditions, we hope to think through together some of the big ethical questions the pandemic has thrust upon all of us. I'd like to begin with a question that is confronting people in every society: stockpiling goods or hoarding goods, rushing to the store, loading up the cart with food items and toilet paper. Is there anything wrong with this, or is it perfectly okay? Let's begin with a show of hands. Let's begin by seeing what our participants think from around the world. How many think there's anything wrong with this? A number of our participants think so. How many don't? Most of our participants find this objectionable. Who will begin our discussion by telling us why? What's wrong with stocking up on food and toilet paper? Maria Lynn in Spain.
I think there's something wrong in stockpiling, and it is that some people are getting very stressed about not having some goods, and that leads to some kind of violence. I have seen many videos on the internet where people start fighting over toilet paper, and that is really unfair for some people who might need that when other person have a fair amount of the product. So, I mean, the supermarkets are not going to close. It's always going to be possible to have some of the basics we need.
Giuseppe in Italy, you thought it was all right to stockpile goods. What do you say to Maria Lynn?
Yeah, I think that it's right in the sense that it's in line what the authority need we do, staying at home, and to stay at home we need to reduce as much as possible going to the grocery market or the supermarket. So in a sense, we are doing what we are requested to. We are limiting our need to go outside.
Harun in Afghanistan.
I think we should be concerned about how our actions affect other people. In context of Afghanistan, for example, a lot of people rush to hoard essentials. In a country like Afghanistan, the government is not strong, the regulatory power is not there. It increased the price for the people, a large part of the population who are needy, and now they cannot afford to buy essentials.
Teresa in the UK.
I think this is fundamentally a question of inequality, because if you can afford to stockpile, then great, good for you. You can buy 20 of each product in one go and then stay at home for a month. But if you're vulnerable or just can't afford that kind of money, you're going to need to go to the shop more often because you can't spend as much in one go. And then when you do go, there's a chance that someone has been in before you and bought 20 in one go, so there's nothing for you to buy. You're going to have to go around 4 shops before you can get what you need, and then do the same again tomorrow. It's not fair.
Giuseppe, what do you say to Teresa?
In Italy, we are out of stock of all hand sanitizer. But I understand people will panic, buy them more than they need. I don't have at home. I did my own at home following some recipe of World Organization.
You made your own hand sanitizer at home?
Yeah. I followed the recipe from World Health Organization. because it was not available anymore in the market. But this was an instruction it should come from the authorities saying maximum 1 liter per family because we are going out of stock. People buy before me, they were in panic. So I understand them. I don't say, hey, you didn't have to buy everything before I arrived.
You don't think they did something wrong?
No, they did to protect their family, not to speculate and to resell on the black market at a higher price. They did to protect their family, so I understand why they did it.
Even if it's scarce, if hand sanitizer is scarce, and people buy a lot of it to protect their family, they've done nothing wrong. Who disagrees with Giuseppe? Sama from Iran. Sama, you're from Iran, but you're currently living in Germany, is that right? You disagree with Giuseppe?
Yes, I generally disagree with Giuseppe because I think here what I see that people buy stuff for the next 6 months. It is irrational in my opinion. I've seen some friends here in Germany that they pile up their cellar, and I think this is not really rational.
It may not be rational, but is it unethical, do you think?
I think it can be also unethical because then it can just brings panic to the other people, which it doesn't help the society. So I think we have to do something which at the end brings some good for the whole society.
Axel from Norway.
I think for me, you have like different situations, right? So if we talk about an actual scarcity, ideally it would be the case that we should just all avoid stockpiling. That would be the ideal situation. But if you contrast that other people in society who follow these rules, I think it's one rational, but also then probably morally okay to think about yourself. You assume that other people will start stockpiling, and then you need to think, okay, what is important for me and my people, the people I have closest to me, and then you can stockpile as well. So I guess it depends on the different situations we have in mind, and also if you believe that other people in society will actually end up following the ideal moral rules.
All right, so let's assume now that there is genuine scarcity of a good, let's say hand sanitizer, but that you're stockpiling it for the sake of protecting your family. Giuseppe's point. Teresa, you still find that objectionable?
I do, because for one thing, it's not logical when it comes to something like hand sanitizer or soap. The whole problem with COVID-19 is about universal good hygiene. If you have stockpiled all this soap and hand sanitizer so that your family has clean hands, well, that's wonderful. But everyone else who can't access hand sanitizer and soap is now going to be spreading the virus.
But you've made it a bit too easy. Suppose it's food for your family, and suppose there is a shortage of certain kinds of important foods. What then?
Well, I understand Giuseppe's point about whether the government have put certain regulations in or not, but I think that whatever the government of your particular country is doing, we still have moral responsibilities, not just to our families, but to our neighbours. And if you see another family in the supermarket, you manage to get a nice big cartload of food before they can get to anything. Great, you're doing well by your family, but we still have responsibilities to each other. We owe other people beyond our own kin something, especially in a crisis like this.
Now, Amazon has enacted rules against price gouging, against putting up the price on needed goods. There was a story widely reported of a man in Tennessee in the U.S. who bought up 17,000 bottles of hand sanitizer and was trying to sell it online at inflated prices. In the end, so much public pressure was brought to bear on this man that he eventually donated it all to charity. So Amazon has a ban on price gouging, but it's recently been reported that where supplies of certain goods are short, Amazon is giving preference in delivery to its best customers, those who pay each year a certain fee to be prime customers. Is that fair or unfair for Amazon to provide quicker access to scarce goods to its best customers? How many think it's fair? Raise your hand. Tara, in the U.S., you think it's fair for Amazon to give preference to its best customers at a time of shortage? Why do you think so?
Because they pay for that service.
Wei Ling, in China, what do you think?
I don't think it's ethical because it's unfair to some people who are poor, who cannot afford the membership fee every year. Probably it's fair during COVID time, but during this crisis, I think the company cannot choose to deliver foods or necessities to their members or the richer people who can afford the membership fee.
Tara, what do you say to Wei Ling?
I agree that it is unethical, but in terms of fairness, I don't believe that it's unfair. Fair is to let the people who pay for that service have what they pay for. That's fairness.
And suppose, Tara, that Amazon, during the pandemic, decided to triple its annual membership fee. Would that be unfair?
I mean, it'd be their right.
Let's change the scenario a little bit to imagine that Amazon wanted to institute a new category of customer called Pandemic Prime, where instead of paying $119 a year, you pay $1,000 for the next 3 months in order to get priority on goods that are scarce. Pandemic Prime, how many would consider that unethical? It looks like most of our participants would. How many would not consider that unethical? Pandemic Prime. Ziji in the UK, you think that's all right? Well, what would be your reason?
I think that we can see from the news that it is much easier around the world, regardless of your location, where you're from, which country you're from, that celebrities and in general more important people, it is much easier for them to get a COVID-19 testing, even easier compared to nurses, doctors fighting on the front line. So it is a fact in our today's society that because of the difference of personal income, because of the difference of social influence, some people are having better and faster access to goods and services. So whether it's ethical or not, I think it's worth a debate. But to me personally, it doesn't really make a difference.
Because you're saying it's what we're doing already in practice when celebrities and affluent people seem to have easier access to testing for COVID-19. That's happening all around us. NBA basketball stars were tested almost immediately, whereas ordinary citizens have, in many places, great difficulty gaining access to a test. Now, Ziji, do you think that inequality is unfair, or you're saying we're doing it already, so we may as well let Amazon Prime do it? Pandemic Prime, I should say.
I actually think if Amazon introduced a pandemic Prime membership, it probably actually would make the system fairer. Because at the moment, celebrities and affluent people, they have access to goods and services, but they might gain this access not on an open market. They might gain this access because they know some important people who can give them the goods and provide the services. So if we introduce a universal requirement for you to enjoy this access, say, for example, if you can have this access to emergency services better than the rest of the people, if you pay £10,000 or £1,000 per year. And I actually think it's fairer because it's more transparent and it's more on the open market.
That's an interesting argument that Ziji has raised, that the market, even with price spikes, even with price gouging, the market is a more fair way of allocating scarce goods than the kind of favoritism that goes on with people who can do it behind the scenes using their connections. Wei Ling, do you agree?
No, I don't agree. Because I think it will cause only the rich people can be tested, and the poor people can never get the chance to be tested and eventually go to die. So it will be totally a disaster for the poor people.
Pandemic Prime, Tabata in Brazil. What do you think?
There's something really bad with a company taking advantage and receiving money from the despair and all the fear that people are feeling. So when we talk about the normal Amazon Prime, when people have priority in the delivery, that's something that existed before the pandemic. But creating something and getting money out of the pandemic seems to me really really wrong. And the second thing, I want to just reply to Zishi. I agree that there are a lot of people taking advantage of their connections, of how famous they are, but all of those things are like out of the law. They are not transparent. But when we allow a company to have a policy on that, we are literally telling the whole society that we are okay with this policy. I don't think we should allow Amazon to do that just because some people are not ethical and are using their connections. I think the government should enforce and say that, especially during the pandemic, we hope our citizens will show more solidarity towards each other and will condemn any policy that goes against it.
Tabata raises an interesting point. Tabata's point is that by legalizing an open market in essentially price gouging, what the society is doing is publicly affirming and approving the use of money to gain an advantage at a time of crisis, whereas when celebrities do it behind the scenes, at least the society is not endorsing it explicitly. What do you say to Tabata's argument? Natalia in India.
Yeah, I would like to just say that this is totally unethical. If this Amazon Prime, if they're only available for certain people, they should not make it unequal like that for people, because everybody needs the supplies for their own family and they have a corporate responsibility, so that everybody has a chance of getting their supplies for their own families.
Thank you. I'd like to shift to another ethical dilemma that arises from the need for social distancing or physical distancing. Most countries are asking people, in some cases requiring people, to isolate themselves to avoid contracting or spreading the virus, and not everybody complies. It turns out that some data companies are using smartphone monitoring to determine where there is compliance with isolation orders and where there isn't, who is and who isn't observing social distancing. One company has used GPS location data from cell phones to determine where people are staying in their homes and where they're going off to the beach, for example. Another company used public Instagram stories and photos to track how many people in Italy were actually observing the requirements to isolate themselves. And for those who went out, where did they go? They found that of those who did go out, 26% were at the beach. Now, this kind of monitoring is offered in the name of the public good, to protect the public. And yet it raises questions about surveillance. So I'd like to see what our participants think about smartphone monitoring to enforce compliance with requirements that people isolate themselves. How many think that such monitoring for compliance is a good idea, and how many find it troubling? Let's first see how many think it's a good idea. About half our participants do. How many find it objectionable? So we have an even division of opinion on this. Let's first hear Tabata from Brazil. You find it objectionable. Tell us why.
Yes, I don't think it's wrong for the government to monitor if people are following the rules or not, but I think it's wrong for people to be monitored without their consent. When a smartphone without government regulation is trying to do that job of being the government, I think it's really scary, especially when we don't have legislation protecting our data and our information and so on. So I think it just opens this whole possibility that smartphone companies, Facebook, Google, are doing much more with our data and our information than we have done our consent to.
And so, Tabata, you worry about private companies doing this, but suppose the government contracts with some of these companies and says, we, the government, are using our authority to ask you to make your technology available to us so that we can determine who is complying. What about then?
If that was voted in Congress, let's say, so it was voted by people who represent the whole population, if that was made clear to all the people, for me it would be the same as just putting a camera in all streets in the whole country. So if there is consent, like someone votes for that, if people know what's happening, and if there's a whole regulation, make sure that this data is being used only for that purpose, then I would be okay.
Provided it's democratically agreed to by the government and it's publicly announced so that everyone is aware, then it's all right?
And the data is protected and we know that it's not being used for another purpose, then it's all right.
Teresa, in Argentina, what do you think?
Well, point one, I would make a division, a distinction between the state tracking you and other people tracking you. One thing is to track and mention it to the person who's breaking the lockdown in this case, and quite a different thing is to report him to the authorities. One of the most important values in Argentina is friendship. And so you tend to back your friends, your neighbors, people you know, and correct them, but don't report them. In this case, that has changed because people have realized that this is no trivial matter. You may laugh, but one thing that is allowed is to go out and walk dogs. So people borrow their neighbor's dogs just to go out for a walk. Now, there is peer pressure to stop doing that. That is very unusual in Argentina, and it makes many of us very happy. When it comes to tracking by the authorities, I would be very careful. We underwent a very tough dictatorship, so we are quite sensitive to that. Governments have started cracking down for good reasons, let us say, like this one. Then it never stopped. Having gone through a dictatorship, we are very sensitive to all this.
Thank you. Wei Ling in China.
I think Chinese is doing this all the time, especially during this pandemic. I am absolutely against this kind of surveillance during Euro time, but at this crisis time, I think it's necessary. And in addition to these technical methods, they also ask the neighbors or friends to report to the government if you find your neighbors are not staying at home or running outside without wearing masks. So I'm not fighting against this pandemic time because I think it is necessary to track the people's where did they go, and if they got infected, you can know immediately who could be affected too.
So you favor surveillance during a pandemic, given the public health emergency, whether of the high-tech kind or of the low-tech traditional kind of neighbors reporting on neighbors who go out without a mask or when they're not supposed to?
Sadly, yes.
Well, thank you for that, Wei Ling. Very interesting. We've reached the halfway point of this edition of The Global Philosopher. The coronavirus has already claimed the lives of tens of thousands of people. It's reached every part of the world. And as you've been hearing, the pandemic is forcing us to confront a number of hard moral questions. You can listen to more of our debate about pandemic ethics in just a few minutes.
This is the BBC World Service.
Life changes.
Glimpses into North Korean life are rare, but recently there's been a new window into the lives of ordinary people living on the other side of that river.
There are many North Korean defectors living in South Korea. The lives of defectors are full of pain.
As time goes by, I feel more and more like a South Korean. But when I'm performing, I become a defector.
This is basically entertainment show, but they don't need to act. Thanks to panel shows and social media, they've become incredibly popular. But at what cost?
They do become typecast as that North Korean, once they're told all their stories, they don't come on TV that much anymore.
I'm Jonathan Griffith.
And I'm Natalia Zor, and we're meeting North Korea's celebrity defectors at